United States Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor has released its 2021 country report on human rights practices in Sierra Leone. The report highlights several human rights lapses committed by countries and their governments across the world in 2021. In Sierra Leone, the report says significant human rights issues including credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings by the government, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by government or on behalf of government, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest or detention, serious government corruption, among other things. This morning, to discuss the report, we have lawyer Rashid Dumbuya, Executive Director, Legal Link, and of course, from the Human Rights Commission, Sierra Leone, we have the Vice Chairman, Victor Idrissa Lansana. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Wake Up Sierra Leone.
Good morning, it's a pleasure.
Good morning, thanks for having me. I'm grateful.
All right, I'm going to start off with you, Rashid. No, let me start off with Victor for obvious reasons. You run the infrastructure that looks after Sierra Leone's human rights credentials and protects the human rights of Sierra Leoneans. I'm sure you've gone through this report and you've seen some of the revelations in that report, which I'm sure are not new based on what the Commission does every now and then. What do you make of the report of the US and where does it put the things that are happening in Sierra Leone?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone on the program. It's always an opportunity for us to talk to our people, about the work that we do and our interventions, in the human rights landscape generally. This report is not actually a new report.
Right.
I think we had time here in the same studio a few months ago where we discussed this report. Probably for obvious reasons. AYV has decided to bring it up again. For us as the Commission, we welcome the report. We welcome reports done by interest groups. For instance, if my brother here, Rashid Dumbuya, puts out a report from his organization,
right.
We believe that many hands make work easier. So we always welcome those reports, those interventions, because we believe that the Commission, cannot do it all alone. And that is where normally we want to ensure that other people, come on board to assist the Commission to be able to do the work. Because human rights is a very complex concept. It is very difficult to practice. And so we are very, very willing and very, very appreciative of any report of any institution, that puts out an unbiased report, that comes out to assist the Commission to be able to protect and promote human rights of all. That is the principal objective why the Human Rights Commission was created, to protect and promote human rights of all in this country. And so we embrace anybody. The U.S. Embassy, if you look at the report, there are several portions in the report where they made mention of the Human Rights Commissions, whether
right.
it's thematic reports or our annual reports, several areas where they made reference to our work. So we welcome the report and we continue to work with our different partners to protect and promote human rights of all in this country.
So let's get to look at, since January, when the report was released, what are the things that have been done so far in correcting some of the wrongs highlighted in that report, if there are anything to go by in relation to what the human right, because I also understand you launched national public inquiry to look into happenings going back to a decade. So how have we been able to address some of these concerns raised in that report?
So it's not just about the report put out or the yearly report that the U.S. Embassy put out. It's actually also about the work that we do, because also the Human Rights Commission put out their reports on a yearly basis.
Right.
So there are several findings, recommendations, that we put out there that we follow up on, so that we ensure that institutions, are up to task to be able to ensure that our recommendations are adhered to. So we have been doing that work. You've been mentioned of the public inquiry that we actually we conducted. It is ongoing. We have gone very, very far into that until we had the disruption by the August 10 incident. But then it's one of the ways in which we believe that we could check the excesses of people who are in power, people who have authority, people who have the machinery, that they could use. So the commission has that kind of legitimacy to be able to checkmate, those powers or those people. So it's very important that, the revelations that we had, the people that have been coming before us to testify, it has been really, really reassuring that, Sierra Leoneans are following what the commission is doing, and Sierra Leoneans believe in the process of the commission, and the institutions themselves, are being respectful to the commission. They submit themselves to the jurisdiction of the commission. And so that is what we believe that has to be done, going forward. The country generally is faced with the challenges of human rights, the enjoyment of human rights. We have always said that government has 3 primary rules, in terms of ensuring that human rights is actually fulfilled. So they have the responsibility to ensure that they protect human rights, they have the responsibility that they fulfill human rights, and they respect human rights. So these 3 are very, very fundamental, for any government to thrive in terms of the human rights landscape. But at the same time, no government or no nation can actually be boastful of enjoying human rights if the citizens themselves, are left behind. Citizens have to understand that they have their own obligations, they have their own duties, and that is why, in fact, it is not just a statutory provision, but it's actually a constitutional provision. The Constitution, by Section 13, is very clear that every citizen has a duty, for instance, to be patriotic, to provide, to help assistance, to give assistance to law enforcement officers, in wherever they belong, in their various communities, to uphold law and order in their society. So, it's a two-way track thing, and we believe that, yes, although the citizens have their responsibilities, but then government actually bears the greatest responsibility or the burden, to ensure that the environment is conducive for citizens to be able to enjoy their human rights. Human rights, any government that puts human rights aside will not survive, definitely. We've seen that all over the world. And so that is why we believe that the reformation, as gradual as they may be, but they are really reassuring. At least since the end of the war, we have made tremendous progress. That doesn't mean that we don't have challenges. There are several challenges in enjoying human rights generally in our country. But then as a nation, a post-war nation, 19 years or 20 years old since the end of the war, we've been able to make some progress so far.
Without going into the details, Victor, the public inquiry ongoing, what are the specific incidents Sierra Leoneans are testifying about, they are coming to talk about? Are they different from the things that are enshrined in the annual reports being put out by the Human Rights Commission? Are they different from the findings enshrined in the U.S. Embassy State of Human Rights reports, the specific incidents people are talking about?
They are not dissimilar. They are not dissimilar. We have a whole complaint registry that receives complaints across the country from members of the society, members of the public. Those complaints are being processed. But then, for the purposes of this public inquiry, we had to look at a 7-year span, from 2015 to 2021. We are looking at issues that have to do with law enforcement, use of force, whether their engagement with the public may have led to serious injury, or whether their engagement may have led to the loss of lives, or the preservation of property, and so on and so forth. Whether they themselves, as a matter of fact, they have the requisites and training to be able to do their work, or they have the logistics, to be able to do their work, and whether Sierra Leoneans themselves actually understand their role in helping law enforcement officers. So these are the issues we're actually looking at from the public inquiry point of view. And they have been coming up, whether it's from the US report or our own annual report or several other institutions who are really right-based institutions. They have been talking about these issues. By the way, we are human beings, so issues 30 years, 100 years ago, are still actually felt. But it's actually about how a generation approaches a particular issue. How willing, the generation is actually in ensuring that they address those issues. So that is what we continue to do. We cannot finish all of the issues today. Generations coming after us will continue with the work. But for us, as far as we continue to be in office, that is what we continue to do. We have committed ourselves, we have taken oaths as commissioners to ensure that we do our best in ensuring that human rights is protected, human rights is fulfilled, and human rights is respected.
Rashid, first off, let me ask about your thoughts on the state of Sierra Leone's human rights standings currently.
You like to put me on the light. All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here and to share the platform with the Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission, and the Executive Director for Legal Link. Of course, Legal Link is a civil society-based organization that helps in its own little way to defend the rights of vulnerable groups in Sierra Leone. So we are happy, and we have always partnered with the Human Rights Commission in advancing the interests of human rights in Sierra Leone. Yes, so like the U.S. country report on the human rights situation dictates, I would also agree to a large extent that the human rights situation in our country is concerning, and there is need for more room for improvement in terms of addressing the issues head-on and making sure we rewrite our human rights story once more. You know, I have always indicated, even when I was a commissioner for human rights at the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone, that one sure way a country can attract investment, foreign direct investment, support from the international system is by ensuring that the government takes human rights issues very seriously. So under international human rights law, the state has 4 obligations. You know, obligation to protect, to fulfill, to respect, and to promote fundamental human rights. The citizens are really the rights holders, you know, and the duty bearer is the state. So it's the state that really has to do much more in terms of, you know, protecting, promoting, fulfilling, and respecting fundamental human rights. And so the report mimics 3 fundamental things which perhaps I want to zero in, and which I believe Sierra Leone must look into properly, because it's becoming also a niche, you know, in the international system. People are now pointing fingers on Sierra Leone when it comes to these issues. It's commonplace for arbitrary arrest and unlawful detentions. It's commonplace for extrajudicial killings. It's commonplace for even the issue of torture, cruel and inhumane treatment, you know, meted out to suspects. You know, we know about the LAJ issue, and so on and so forth. So we don't want these kind of stories to permeate the social media and the world at large about Sierra Leone.
But these are stories, these are things happening.
Yes, there are things happening. They are factual. I mean, the evidence is very clear. You know, our findings even reveal, I remember the first report we issued out in 2020. Yeah. We had over 51 extrajudicial deaths. And thankfully...
Since when?
Yes, since 2018 to date. So we are happy the Human Rights Commission is making efforts to do an inquiry into these deaths and to see perhaps what accountability measures can be addressed going forward or recommended going forward. So we have to take much more steps, and the report here also mimics that, that there are a lot of extrajudicial killings, the Panamba Road killings. You know, we all know what happened there, the Tombo, the Lonsa, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, when these things happen, so here is how the international system judges, you know, a state's obligation and a response to human rights concerns. So it's not so much about when they happen. It has to do also much more about how you handle them after they have happened, because that is where the complicity is seen. So if nothing is done, then there is the presumption of the state, you know, acquiescence and allowing the violation to fester. And that's where the state will be held accountable under international law to have violated fundamental human rights. So setting up inquiries, setting up investigation bodies afterwards to look into the issues, address them holistically, and bring to account those who are responsible is one sure way that Sierra Leone can rewrite its stories again in terms of human rights compliance.
You know, Victor, the Vice Chairman for the Human Rights Commission mentioned one of the things they are looking at in this public inquiry is how forces, security forces respond to things. And so it goes back to, for example, the Pademba Road, the protest, I mean, the other violent incidents across the country. And you mentioned that looking at the death you've reported since 2018, about 51, and of course more might have happened. The August 10, for example, which I'm sure you've not captured.
Yes.
How are we addressing all of that? You talk about, the post era of those incidents can also be factored into whatever concerns or how we address them. You take the August 10 carnage, for example, where lives were lost. So the rights to life were clearly violated. The security personnel were killed. Civilians were killed there. So how then do we address all of that?
Yes, so it's important that the Human Rights Commission is taking on this public inquiry, and they've even extended the phases to span as far back as 2015.
Right.
So that at least there will be a clear balance in terms of looking at the issues from one government to the other. All right, that is very good, and we await to see the recommendations that will come out from that exercise. But then also, remember the President has set up the Special Investigation Committee on the August 10 issue, and I understand they are currently on work. So we are also looking forward to see what will be the outcome and the recommendations. But it's important that these kind of mechanisms are seen, after such occurrences. And we take them seriously so that at the end of the day, the outcomes reflect the energy, and the desire of the international community in terms of holding accountable those who have committed such violations in our country. So we are waiting as a civil society-based organization. We always try to work with state actors, but we also know the length to which we can go. And we are also preparing our shadow reports, because we have duty to do shadow reports, all right, to make sure at least we are all in line in terms of the facts as they occurred in our country. But Samuel, to be candid enough, Sierra Leone is at the crossroads, and we have to be very careful. So now we are going to be assessed, again, our yearly reports.
Right.
The UN Human Rights Council is working on some reports, and of course there are many African review mechanisms also going on, and we are entering into our election year. So we have to be very careful, because many reports have shown that our peace is fragile,
right,
and there are tensions at the moment. We are still grappling with the voter registration exercise and all the tensions, associated with it. So we don't want to also go into a phase where we are in an election year and we have not addressed some of these things. So they become an albatross on the neck of Sierra Leoneans, and a small spark might lead to so many problems. So we are really at a crossroads, and we have to be very careful at this stage to make sure we tone down and de-escalate tension.
Is the state showing any sign of being cavalier for some of these things?
Yeah, that brings me to this morning's update, because I understand the mayor of Freetown is being invited this morning. I don't know how this will pan out again to our de-escalation of tensions and making sure we create a space where, at the very least, going forward, we now be seen to be dialoguing and perhaps addressing issues in a much more friendly way and less tensionable way. But in all of this, I believe the state should now be thinking on going forward. Arbitrary arrest, inviting opposition members to the stations when they make comments, or when they say things, or when they put up a position. We have to be looking at these things, because in a democracy, these things can be allowed. I know there are limitations, but the freedom of expression, you cannot be seen to be suppressing it, as and when you think it's best. That's why if we believe there are threats, then there must be due process to ascertain those threats. But we cannot be judging.
Just out of curiosity, as you talk about the mayor, out of curiosity, should we allow politicians escape accountability because of the way our politics is structured, in the sense that, for example, the mayor is being investigated according to the invite that we saw, is being investigated for obstruction of police duties and all of that, and that's literally against the law. So you must allow the police to do their job.
Yes, so it's important that the due process is followed, and also we are following that incident, because we believe also suspects have rights, and we look forward to the rights of suspects being guaranteed. as dictated by the Rwanda guidelines, so which Sierra Leone is a party.
Okay.
So it's not so much about the call, it's about also when she comes to the station or the CID headquarters, her rights, as a suspect, are guaranteed and that are not suppressed. Because again, we don't want a situation where a stakeholder of such nature, is seen to be, suppressed in ways that can foment tension in our country at this time. So yes, the law allows for people to be called by the police where the police believe or have reasonable evidence that they have acted in ways that are uncomely and criminal. But then in so doing also, the police must also be seen. And this is my emphasis. It must be seen to be upholding the values and the tenets of a democratic society, and of course, the Rwanda guidelines that talks about protection of and fair trial rights of suspects whilst they are in custody.
All right, let me welcome Imran Sila in our Studio 2 from the Strategic Communications Unit at the Ministry of Information and Communications. Imran, good morning and welcome to Wake Up Sierra Leone.
Thanks a lot. Trinity, good morning.
So you're invited here this morning to look at the state of human rights in Sierra Leone. Going back to the report that was put out by the United States Embassy, and the report is talking about arbitrary arrest, unlawful killings, extrajudicial killings, as of course Legal Link also put out a statement. Putting the numbers at the numbers of death at 51 by then of extrajudicial killings. So it appears political and civil liberty or civil rights are being compromised, are being trampled on by your government. Is that anything to go by?
Well, thank you again, Samuel. I think it is important for this conversation that we situate ourselves correctly. What do I mean by that? I looked at the flyer you sent me, someone from your team sent me, and the report came out about 6 months ago. So it is important for the public to understand that we're not talking about a report that came out last week or the week before. Yeah, it's about 6 months ago, and a lot of things have ebbed and flowed, right, over the period. Right, and yes, I understand the issues raised, the issues that are germane to the development of a country. And again, it's about how we interpret and understand the reports, right? You have selected a few issues. The report is quite detailed. I spent time over the weekend to look at the report, and you see there are instances where it commends the state or government, as it were, right, for making movements. So, for example, right, with the judiciary, we know that it has improved in terms of judicial access from 30 to 70%, right, and that's a Legal Link report in 2019. We also know that high court and criminal cases never happened, right, apart from Freetown in the past. Now we're talking about district where we have residing magistrates and residing judges and all the rest of it. It also, you might also want to capture the fact that there's also a baseline. What do I mean by a baseline? So for Europe, I think one judge or magistrate covers about 5,000 or so, right, people, depending on the geographical size, right? The sub-regional baseline should be 33,000, right? Before 2018, I think the report in 2015 quite clearly suggests that it was 143,000 for one judge or magistrate. Yeah, and now we're talking about 88,000 per judge or magistrate. That is because I think the judiciary as a whole has worked on, right, what it felt were the lapses. But then again, as we continue to situate ourselves, right, with regards to this report and the issues raised, that's, over 6 months ago, I think we have to have a sense. Reports generally gives an impression, an indication, right, as to what has been done and what are the challenges, what needs to be done, what needs to be looked at. So, I'll give you a typical example. And sometimes I get bashed for giving those examples, but I have to do it. So, for example, in the United States, they are now talking about Roe v. Wade. I have 2 lawyers there, right? They're talking about Roe v. Wade, the right to abortion. It's an ongoing issue. You're talking about the right to vote. Does it mean that the United States is not a democracy? Does it mean it's not an enviable democracy? Does it mean they haven't made progress in the last decades? No, I think they have. But essentially, it behooves this generation to see how they can grapple with those issues on Roe v. Wade and on the rights to vote and minority groups and all the rest of it. So I think if you situate this discussion within that context, you'll understand that the report raises issues, but then it also commends the states and government, the judiciary, right, for making progress on certain issues.
So let me ask this question now, Imran. Like you mentioned, the report was published in January. Now, since the report was published, what are the gains? What are the improvements? What are the redress mechanisms that have been put in place by the government to address some of those critical concerns raised in that report?
So look, I think reflections and analysis of reports and situations as they occur and unfold on a daily basis, right, are not time-bound in a sense. I mean, government understands that there's a sense of urgency on certain issues in terms of how you address them, right? But then there's also has to be some lasting solutions. So I'll give you a few examples. We have done a bill in Parliament which talks about women's involvement. Yeah. So now, essentially, I think every political party now has a responsibility. 1 out of every 3 members of Parliament that would be selected in the future has to be a woman. That is about making sure you have those laws ready, right, to be able to bring about the necessary change that you want. Or it's about getting rid of the death penalty, or it's about talking about the criminal libel. So, for example, again, if you want to equate us with the United States, I mean, there are states in the US where they still have the death penalty, right? That's a challenge for this generation, but then also for the next generation to see how they can seek redress and change that. We have moved leaps and bounds when it comes to the death penalty. It's not there anymore. So, look, I understand it's a mixed bag. Yes, there are issues that we still need to address, absolutely, yeah. But have we made progress over time in terms of the judiciary, the way it goes about doing its job, the way, I mean, it is bringing in the necessary changes, right, in terms of making sure that people in far-flung communities in this country have access to justice in real time. I think the statistics and the data quite clearly shows that. But look, if you want to talk about, because I had you and Rashid talking about August 10 and, you know, Yvonne Akisoya being invited, and you raised an important point. Now, look, Yvonne Akisoya happens to be a citizen of the Republic of Sierra Leone, right? Not above reproach, not by any means, not even me sitting here, neither the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. So if you have an invitation to go to the police station, I think instead of all too easily allowing it to get clouded in politics, right, and begin to look at it from political lens, for whatever it is worth, I think it is necessary that she turns up at the police station, right, and go and answer to those questions that the police would like to talk to her about. But let me give you what I think would last in the minds of the public listening to us this morning. That's a situation that happened in Makeni during August 10. You know, I went there immediately after August 10, me and some members of my team, right, strategic communications. We needed to get firsthand what had happened. We went there, spoke to the LUC. He was the new LUC. The LUC who was there before him had left and had come to town. You saw the police station being burnt. You saw the police barracks being burnt. You heard about the horror stories, right, and things that people went through, particularly the police. Lo and behold, I didn't realize that the LUC who was there, right, leading up to the 10th of August was someone I had known for a very long time. So at my time when I was attending university, and this is very important, Samuel, you would like to listen to this. We had a group of police officers, so it was Samadia, it was Lengo, it was Givao and others who went to college to get their first degrees. Some went to read law and all the rest of it. So I met this gentleman in college. I didn't realize, the last time I saw him, he was at New Englandville Police Station as the LUC. Didn't realize he had been transferred to Kamakwe. And he gave me a minute-by-minute account as things unfolded in Kamakwe on the 10th of August. He himself as LUC made 5 attempts to pacify, right, the inhabitants in Kamakwe and get them to understand, look, there are better ways to seek redress. There are better ways to communicate. At the last and final attempt, no sooner he turned his back, right, they went on the rampage. then Kasankean, then call ambulance, rap and find one, like saying a Muslim burying. That's what they take pull and commodity. This is not the mindset said they give me an account. But this is what touched me the most from our discussions last week. He gave me an account as to how Munda, one of the police officers, one of 6 police officers killed, how he died. Munda had lived in Kamakwe for 25 years. He hails from Mwamba district. Ordinarily, they say, if you tell Mwamba, if you tell Munda, say, "Lona go Mwamba, Lona go Waka," they vex by you. You know, nothing for do Mwamba. He lived in Kamakwe 25 years. He married in a day picking for all intents and purposes. And picking them, no, the talkment day, na limba on my get, then get a one pan and pick it. So on that day, he was told by his compatriots, police officers, said, "Be careful." And he said, "No, but me na one pan then, na me home this." Yeah? Lo and behold, na the first and tompa. So you want to talk about human rights violations, you want to talk about what gets us to that point as a state, as a nation.
So does that...
The point I'm making is
yes,
this.
please.
Rashid talks about toning down the rhetoric, and that is something I entirely agree to. Yeah, when you have highly placed individuals in opposition parties, and this is something I keep saying, and it appear for be too much probably for me, but when you have highly placed individuals, right, peddling, right, bigotry statements and all the rest of it, what do you expect? What do you expect?
So the
this is what it comes down to.
The question is, how should we address this? Because it appears all what we keep doing as a nation is just, trading accusations politically. You see, APC versus SLPP, who caused this, who caused that. But as a nation, as a state, how do we address some of these things? Yes, security personnel were killed brutally. Unfortunately, civilians were also killed brutally, very unfortunate in our state. So how do we address these killings? How do we make our states better? We've seen over time where opposition politicians using people as human shield to escape accountability. We've seen over time where the government in power is using policies as way to revenge, tit for tat. How do we stay away from all of these things so that we're able to rewrite our human rights records and put it at a place where we can be proud as a nation, that at the end of the day there are mechanisms to address some of these things, but fundamentally we protect, we promote, and we respect the fundamental human rights that the Human Rights Commission, for example, is mandated to do. Imran.
So, Samuel, there are several layers, right, to the question you have raised. One has to be quite clearly in terms of legislation and laws being passed in Parliament, making sure that we open and deepen the space. And I think if this government is not giving credit for anything, we should be giving credit for the amount of laws we've passed in making sure that we deepen the democratic space, open up the political space, making sure a lot more people are going to get involved, including marginalized groups, women and children. We also want to talk about another human rights in accordance with Sustainable Development Goals. We're talking about the right to education. So those are things that government can do and government can lead by example, obviously. But then I also think that we all as politicians, and it's away from government now, we all as politicians have a responsibility and have a role to play. So when you hear politicians making bigotry statements, talking about tribes and region, ordinarily they wouldn't, because then with themselves now people from other regions and other tribes. But when it comes to politics, it's an easy place for them to go and begin to peddle those kinds of comments. And it doesn't bode well for national development, for peace, national cohesion. And I think we should begin to call them out, right? The sooner politicians show responsibility, guard their words, the kind of utterances they make in public, knowing that whatever Imran Sila say will get a huge sway, right, with some sections of society, and also often for all, people are going 5 in, be overactive and full of energy for go by every single word we say. The moment we begin to understand the responsibility and our roles in society, how we can help to shape public opinion, right, and help to encourage others to see ourselves in one another, right? I think, the better it will be for we, number two. Thirdly, I think, we shouldn't frown and begin to think it's all political when people are being invited, right, to go to police stations. Honestly, I have had a fair few invitations in the past, right? But then I came out of it. And no one batted an eyelid, not even me, because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I had to go to the police station for one reason or the other, and I did what I had to do and came back. Yeah. So if the police are not being allowed to do their job, yes, I understand people might have issues with the police and their excesses or what seemingly looks like the excesses. I'm sure that the police would have those internal reviews and begin to look internally and see how they can do better and be better. But name me one country in the world where people don't have issues with the police. Not even the United States, not even the United Kingdom. Yeah? They're ongoing issues.
Right.
They will tell you in the United States that they are picking on blacks and all the rest of it. So those issues are ongoing. In the UK, it's quite the same. In Germany, in France, and all the rest. So look, the police have their issues to contend with. I'm not saying they should be up to that challenge. They should be able to be better. They should be able to do better. They should be able to have those internal review mechanisms and see, right, what they can do, at least to change public perception. Right? And those are things I think that this new Inspector General is probably engrossed with and wants to do. Right? The judiciary too is doing its own bit in making sure that they open up the space, people have access to justice, right, across districts. I mean, we know that special courts have been created, sexual offences court and all the rest of it. So, look, that's the way to go, right? But yes, we have those challenges, and I think the more we face the challenges with optimism, right, and knowing that those challenges are surmountable, I think the better it will be for all of us.
Victor, unfortunately, we're being dangerously chased by time. But how do we address these concerns? Because, I mean, when we, on a normal day, we talk about human rights issues, I mean, it's about who or what political party has done the wars over the other. So are we really going to get it right? Because when the APC is in power, it forgets its own human rights abuses ongoing and starts pointing fingers. Oh, the SLPP did this. When the SLPP is in power, it's the same thing. And in fact, the opposition always blames the ruling party. The ruling party goes to blame the opposition always. So we're in a very dicey situation. And sometimes I sympathize a lot with the national institutions, I mean, in charge of setting things right. How do we address some of these things where the politicians are not making things easy for the institutions to work?
You know, there are two ways. I mean, the situation you have actually described is really worrisome. I mean, it has been there for the longest time. So to me, I would prescribe two ways. One is to raise the veil. So now, there is a veil between Sierra Leone and our people. I mean, Sierra Leone has suffered too much in the hands of our people. I mean, what we have seen, I mean, repeatedly over years is a situation where Sierra Leoneans are much more, they feel much more obliged to their political parties than to Sierra Leone. And that is the problem. So once we feel much more obliged, you know, government in, government out, will not have that kind of, you know, commitment to do as the laws actually prescribe. We will not have citizens actually living by their, I mean, by their obligations or duties as the Constitution actually prescribes. So that is one of the ways. Let us raise the veil between us as the people and the country, and see the country as the one thing that all of us should defend. And then the second way to actually address this issue is to have the law supreme. So, I mean, just the summary you've given us, year in, year out, or, I mean, government in, government out, we see the same blames. You know, when there's a change of post, the same blames come. You know, they never die down. They are the same. So, we have to have a situation where the laws should reign supreme. And nobody should use politics to subvert the law. So whether you are Imran Silla, or whosoever that is in government, if you go against the law, I mean, there should be predictability. The police should be able to invite Imran Silla, whosoever that is in governance or that is in government, to answer to questions. And not to say, oh, because he's A or B. If you are also, for instance, you talk about Yvonne Akisoya, the law should be predictable in the sense that she has been invited for what? I mean, the police are alleging obstruction of justice. In other countries, it is normal where they invite opposition members, government authorities It happens every day. You know, governments in other countries, even they lose cases on a daily basis in courts. So that is the kind of thing we actually need to aspire for. Where the law reigns supreme. The law does not respect any individual. You know, except where there are laid down immunity laws, okay, where there are immunities. But otherwise, the law should really reign supreme so that everybody knows when you do A, this is the result. But we have a situation where you do things here today, because you are a government officer, for instance, you know somebody will call for you, to say, okay, in the courts or at the police headquarters, they call to appeal, so that, oh, let him go free and I'll go about this and that. And then when also it's the same thing, the opposition will do something, all they will do, they will galvanize their supporters to say, well, let us tweak it to be a political witch thing. If it's a political witch thing, when do we actually move and distinguish between wrongdoing and actually implementing the law? So this is what is actually holding us back as a nation. And that is what collectively we have to fight for. Let us raise the veil and see Sierra Leone as the national cause for everybody. So that where there are laws in place, policies are there, it doesn't matter the government is in power today, tomorrow. The
law should be supreme.
Yes, exactly. That is, to me, that is the totality of everything.
All right. Rashid, quickly, what path should we take?
Yes, so I will come from the civil society perspective. I think civil society is key in this, in terms of holding the balance and calling things as they are, serving as watchdogs, and making sure what is good, like Victor rightly said, is good for the goose, is good for the gander. And when it doesn't apply in such situations, to call that out as it is, so that at the very least the records are made known. So yes, we have a big stride before us. We are going to the 2023 elections. That is key. And so anything we do, we have to be conscious to de-escalate the tension. I'll repeat that again, because that's exactly what will make for a prosperous and fulfilling 2023 elections. We don't want to tone, more tensions and create more unrest in our governance, architecture, and even in our society at the moment. So my last word will go to all institutions who have mandates in terms of promoting and protecting human rights, and also creating the enabling environment for human rights to fester, to do their best in making sure Sierra Leone comes out, clean in terms of our human rights rankings. These reports are indicting, and they will serve as a disincentive for foreign direct investment in the future if we don't do something about them.
All right, quickly, Imran.
I hope I'll have my own last bite.
Quickly, Imran.
Yes, just a few facts I'd like to state before I round up in 30 seconds, as always,
Please.
Samuel. We know that for the very first time since 1965 in Sierra Leone, that High Court criminal sessions are now happening in Pujon, Tonkolili, Bont, Cambia, Koinadugu, Kailaon, Moyamba, Potloko, and Kono districts. Yeah? And in 2020, out of 800 cases listed, 477 were completed in one calendar year. And that represents about 60% of cases assigned. Yeah? We also know that the judiciary is doing what you would call institutional changes based on the weaknesses as they perceive it to be. And so now they now have court operations manager, HR manager, procurement and logistics, registrar, Supreme Court, registrar, Court of Appeal, principal accountants. They now have a communications head. But let me also say this, right, in summary. For every report that comes out, Samuel, whether it be the MCC scorecard, for which we have successively passed in 3 years, or human rights report, or all the rest of it, whatever report comes out, for me, it gives you a sense, and that is what I keep saying. Let us not just see it in black and whites. There's a lot to celebrate over 4.5 years in terms of the direction of this country with the leadership of President Julius Maada Bio. And that is something I think we need to understand, right, as we have these discussions.
Thank you very much, Imran Sila from the Strategic Communications Unit, the Ministry of Information and Communications. And shortly we shall be joining Ransford McLean in our studio 2 for the latest in sports. But just quickly, Kamara Charles is saying civil societies like Rashid. Okay, I'm not going through that. George Tony saying, well said, some politicians using police as tools to do their bidding. Mind you, this has been the habit of these two parties in years past, and these officers will face would not face justice of any kind. Victor Akomengot is saying holding politicians to account should not be one-sided. Benjamin Akipama is saying we must eradicate this culture of blaming names and others as a country. We must band together and figure out a way to unite our people. The politics of dividing and conquering are bad. George Owell is saying, Imran, nobody will give this administration credit for anything because you guys had never done anything good. Okay, we're not here for the blame game. Let's push. If you don't do anything wrong, why then would they invite you to go to the police station? Okay. It's interesting. I'm going to hold the messages there. And unfortunately, this is where we end today's edition of Wake Up Sierra Leone. Before we go, a quick reminder of our quote, which says, to deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. And it comes from the late Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa. Many thanks to our sponsors, Local Commercial Bank at Town, for their support to the show. Continue staying with us. We have other interesting programs coming up throughout the day until we meet again. My name is Samuel Wise Bangora saying, have yourself a lovely day.